Hey everyone, this is Sam from In the Mix. I needed a decent dust cover for my 61 key Korg PA4X keyboard, so I asked my friend Frank to help me make one. Buying off-the-shelf generic covers can be hit or miss. Sometimes they don't fit properly or pinch the cables, or use a low-quality thin material which can become a problem. I thought it'd be fun to document the process and share it with you, as it can be easily adapted for other keyboards as well. Without further ado, let's jump right into making our project. We need a piece of fabric that measures 27 inches long by 48 inches wide. I got this light vinyl from a local Joanns for $9 a yard. It's fairly thick but very soft inside. A regular home sewing machine with a general purpose foot can handle this easily. I prefer vinyl because it's thicker and more durable and offers a little more protection against spills and scratches. With vinyl, it's best to use 100% poly or nylon upholstery threads. I also recommend finishing the raw edges with double fold bias tape. It adds extra support and makes the cover look better. Of course, we also need a regular home sewing machine, scissors, a soft sewing tape measure, and a marking pencil. The basic shape of this keyboard is fairly simple and standard and doesn't really have any problematic features. But still, if the cover is too snug, it could put stress and pressure on the mod wheel and other sensitive features. We also need to include the power and audio and MIDI cables remaining plugged in while the keyboard is covered. So I'm going to add a bit extra to the measurements to make the cover a little loose. On top of that, I'm also going to add some extra fabric to account for seam allowance. The type of keyboard stand that you use could also be a deciding factor as well. In my case, I'll finish off the cover right under the base of the keyboard, because if I let it hang too low, it could hit the stand and bunch up. Just be aware of these kinds of things before you start cutting the fabric. Some instruments might have oversized physical features that extend past the dimensions on top or around the base, so you would want to take those into account while doing the measurements. Let's measure up the instrument. Starting from the widest points, I'm measuring 38.5 inches across at the base for the front panel. That's also going to be the width of the back panel for this particular keyboard. Next, it's going to be one measurement across the front, top and back panel. This instrument is pretty flat, so I'm going to start here at the lowest point of the keyboard, going straight up over the front and top panel all the way across the back to the base. It's measuring 20.5 inches. Looking at the side of the instrument, I'm measuring 13.5 inches across at the base, 14.5 inches across the top, 4.5 inches from the base to the highest point on the right, and 2.5 inches from the base to the top corner on the left. We're going to cut 3 pieces altogether. One big piece for the main body, which is going to cover the front, top, and back panel, and 2 smaller contrasting pieces for the side panels. For the main panel, we have 38.5 inches for the width and 20.5 inches for the length. I added 1.5 inches to these numbers for seam allowance and a little extra wiggle room, and cut this rectangular piece that measures 22 inches by 40 inches. These 2 long lines are the measurements for the front and back of the keyboard, and these 2 are for the measurement that we took across the front, top, and back panel. I have a 1/2 inch seam allowance for the sides that are going to be sewn to the side panels. For the top and bottom, I'm giving a generous 3/4 inch hem allowance in case I want the cover to hang lower. We can always trim away the excess fabric later on. This is how the main piece is going to cover the front, top, and back panel. This fabric is fairly soft and flexible, and it will nicely curve around the edges and hang down on both sides. Here, we have a 1/2 inch seam allowance for the side edges, starting from the front, over the top, and down the back panel. I also have a 3/4 inch hem allowance that I've added to the top and bottom edges. For the side panels, we had 14.5 inches across for the top, 13.5 inches across for the bottom, and 2.5 inches and 4.5 inches for the sides. The top edge is an inch longer because it includes the extra measurement on the top right corner. I'll add a 1/2 inch just to have some extra room and a 1/2 inch seam allowance for each corner. So the total measurement for the top edge is going to be 16 inches. The back panel caves in a bit right here. If we follow this line, there won't be any room left for the power and audio cables. Instead, it would be a better idea to let the cover hang down straight, so it will go over the cables that are sticking out of the back panel. This is the reason I'm giving the same measurement to the lower edge as well. For the shorter edges, I added a 1/2 inch seam allowance at the top and 3/4 inches at the bottom. So now we have 3 3/4 inches for the shorter side and 5 3/4 inches for the longer side. Then I noticed the longer side could use just a little extra, so I rounded the measurement to the next big number, which is 6 inches. Then, based on these final measurements, I cut these 2 contrasting side panels. To recap the numbers, I have 16 inches for the top and bottom line, 3 3/4 inches for the short side, and 6 inches for the longer side. There's a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around and 3/4 inch hem allowance for the bottom line. Now that we have all 3 pieces cut out, we can go ahead and sew the 2 side panels to the main panel. The way we place the side panels is important. There are multiple ways for doing this, but this should give you an idea. Lay down the long piece vertically, right side up, then lay the side panels wrong side up. Place them in opposite corners, but make sure the slanted edges are facing each other. It doesn't matter which side of the panel is front or back. As long as you use this configuration, both side panels are going to end up in the proper position. If you're using a soft cloth fabric, you can pin the side panels to keep them in place. But with vinyl, either use a small pin or no pin at all, as it might leave holes in the fabric. This is how we're going to sew the side panels. Starting from the right side panel, make sure the fabrics are as flat as possible, the right sides are touching, and the edges match up properly. Here you can see a 1/2 inch allowance all around and a 3/4 inch hem allowance at the bottom for the right side panel. Starting from the back corner, we're going to start sewing up to 1 inch away from this corner, so we can raise it up and make a small slit on the main panel. Once you make a slit, sew it up to the corner, stop with the needle in the down position inside the fabric, and pivot the side panel so the outer edges will line up. Then, again, we're going to continue sewing up to 1 inch away from the next corner and do the same thing. Raise the side panel and make a small slip right on the top panel. You can even mark it as long as you stay within the 1/2 inch seam allowance area. Then, sew up to the corner, stop with the needle inside the fabric, and pivot again. The outer edges of both top and side panels should line up. Continue sewing, and this time finish it off at the very end. I suggest you mark and make the slits on a flat surface before you start sewing. This way, you won't have to struggle with the fabric under the needle. Now that I've made the slits, I'll go ahead and sew the right side panel to the main panel. Again, make sure the right sides are facing each other. Starting at the back, I'm going to use a straight stitch right on the 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'll backstitch at the beginning and at the ends of my lines to secure the ends. Go slowly till you get to the corner where you've made a slit. You can walk the foot to the corner. When you stop to pivot at the bottom corner, you're always going to want to stop with the needle inside the fabric. Turn the side panel, and at the very corner, lower your foot and continue sewing. A 1/2 inch all the way till you get to the next corner, and remember to backstitch the end lines. When you come to the corner where the next slit is, keep your needle down and pivot the side panel one more time. Lower the foot at that corner and keep sewing again until the side panel is sewn all around to the other side of the top panel. Backstitch the line at the very end to close the corner. Now I'll do the same thing with the left side panel, except this time I'm going to start sewing from the top corner so the fabric will be on my left side. Make sure the right sides for both panels are touching and the side panel is properly lined up with the main panel. I'll do a few stitches and then backstitch to close the corners. At this point, I'm repeating the same process pretty much. I've made the slits to this panel as well, so I can just keep sewing up to the corner. Walk the needle right up to the corner. Keep the needle down. Then turn the side panel and continue sewing. Sew up to the next corner and keep the needle down in the fabric and turn the side panel. Always make sure both panels are lined up perfectly. This time, I'm going to sew all the way to the end and backstitch to finish off the corner. Now that both side panels are sewn to the main panel, they should look like this on both sides. If you're using a thick material, you can trim the corners or any excess seam allowance to make them less bulky. Next, turn the cover inside out and place it on the keyboard. We still need to tidy up the raw edges at the bottom. Also, this would be a good time to decide about the drop length. I have a 3/4 inch hem allowance for the bottom line. That means there's a 3/4 inch of fabric that can be folded over. I'm going to use a little less than that because I want the cover to drop a little lower than the base of the keyboard. Now I'm going to enclose the raw edges with a double fold bias tape. It'll give it a neat look and also stabilize the cover. Just slip the bias tape over the fabric and sandwich the raw edges right inside in the middle. Bring the needle down to hold the tape and fabric together. Then use pins or secure it with your fingers and sew the tape in place about 1/8 to 1/4 inch away from the fold. This tape will be hidden so you won't even see it from the outside, but still you want to stitch as straight as possible. Once the tape is stitched in place all the way around the cover, I'll use the width of the tape and fold the edge to the wrong side, so this is about a 1/2 inch fold. This time I'll keep the foot right at the edge of the binding. I'll stitch close to the folded edge on a straight line. This works on most fabrics and will reinforce the bottom edges. Okay folks, here's the moment of truth. We have an absolutely perfect fit over the keyboard with and without the cables plugged in. Hopefully this video inspired you to make your own cover. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to share it with us in the comments section. Thanks for watching and see you soon.